I woke up just as the sky was getting light. There was no alarm clock, no city light leaking through a crack in the curtains, only a pure darkness, so quiet it made me uneasy, slowly fading into gray-blue. I sat up. Beneath me was animal hide. Beside me were 7 or 8 people still asleep. The fire had only a little dark red ember left. It took me several seconds to confirm it. I had traveled through time. I had arrived before agriculture, before the word work had any meaning. My first reaction was, what am I supposed to do today? But no one gave me an answer, because there was no schedule here. Only later did I learn that the group I was with lived almost exactly like the Jew hoansi people, studied in Botswana in 1963 by the archaeologist Richard Lee. Lee made a statistic that overturned what everyone thought they knew. These adults spent only about 17 hours a week getting food, an average of 2.5 hours a day. On my first day there, I saw it for myself. In the morning, no one rushed me out of bed. I sat for a while. Someone handed me a piece of roasted meat left over from the night before. Everyone sat together, eating and talking. No one looked at a phone, because there were no phones. About 2 hours later, a few people stood up, picked up spears and leather bags, and walked away. I gestured to ask whether I should go with them. They waved their hands, meaning, we have enough people today. So I stayed in camp. I tried to find something to do, because not doing anything made me anxious. I picked up a stone and tried to learn how they ground things, but after grinding it twice, I had no idea what I was supposed to be grinding. An older person beside me looked at me, handed me a bone and a piece of flint, and made a scraping motion. So I started scraping that bone. I scraped for a long time. My hand got sore. I stopped. No one said I was being lazy. Only later did I understand that this kind of low-intensity, intermittent, spontaneous activity was the normal state of their day. Archaeologists have found the same pattern among the Hadza in Tanzania, the Aché in Paraguay, and the Martu in Australia. Different continents, different environments, but the amount of survival labor each week all falls between 15 and 20 hours. What about the remaining time? They rest, talk, make small objects, and stare into space. On the third day after I traveled back, I went hunting with them once. We walked a long way. The pace was not fast. We just kept walking. The man leading the group kept looking at traces on the ground, occasionally crouching down to touch the soil. I only learned later that this was a strategy called persistence hunting. Humans are the only species on Earth that can run prey into heat stroke over long distances. We sweat to release heat, while most four-legged animals cannot pant to cool themselves while running. So we do not need to be faster than the prey. We only need to outlast them. That day, we tracked an antelope for nearly 4 hours. In the end, it collapsed not because it had been pierced by a spear, but because its body overheated. We carried it back. Everyone in the camp gathered around, cutting meat, dividing it, and roasting it on the spot. That was the fullest meal I had eaten since traveling back. And then, in the afternoon, there was nothing to do. Yes, the afternoon. An entire afternoon, with no meetings, no emails, and nothing that needed to be finished. I sat under a tree and watched several women string shells into necklaces. I went over to see how they drilled holes in the shells. They used a flint point, rotating it bit by bit. It took a long time to pierce a single hole. I asked them why they were making it. They gestured. It looked nice. Then they laughed. Later, I saw an almost identical description in an archaeological report. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, perforated shells about 100,000 years old were discovered. The nearest ocean was 20 kilometers away. That means someone deliberately walked 40 kilometers there and back to collect those shells, then spent hours drilling holes in them, just to turn them into ornaments. Not for eating, not for survival, just because they look nice. On the 5th day after I traveled back, someone led me deep into a cave. The torchlight fell on the cave wall, and I saw a horse. It was painted with red and black mineral pigment. It had muscle lines, the sense of running motion, and you could even see the instant when its front hoof was lifted off the ground. I froze there. I knew what this was. In 1994, the 30,000-year-old paintings in France's Blombos Cave were discovered. They showed lions, rhinoceroses, and mammoths, using perspective and contrast between light and dark. They are among the oldest pieces of evidence for the word art. The people who painted them were not professional painters. There was no art market. No one paid them to create. They did it simply because they had time, they had thoughts, and they wanted to leave something behind. I stood in that cave for a long time. Suddenly I realized that in my original world, I had to squeeze out time to create, to make things by hand, and to do all the non-utilitarian things. But here, art was not squeezed out. It flowed naturally, because there was already so much time. At night, the real highlight of the day began. After darkness fell, everyone gathered around the fire. Someone began to speak as if telling a very long story. Others interrupted, laughed, and imitated animal calls. Although I could not understand the specific words, I could feel the rhythm. This was not everyday chatter. This was storytelling. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner analyzed recordings of Jew, hoansi conversations. She found that 81% of daytime conversation was practical. Who had found what? What to eat today? Who had divided the meat unfairly? But at night, 81% of the conversation around the fire was stories, myths, ancestors, distant places, jokes, and fantasies. In other words, human beings make a living in the daytime. At night, they become human. Every day after I traveled back felt stretched out. Not because time slowed down, but because no tasks were cutting time apart. I did not need to finish something before 3 in the afternoon. I did not need to reply to messages before 10 at night. Time was a whole thing. I could sit there and look at the fire for half an hour without any guilt. There was another detail that shocked me. Every night, I would wake up in the middle of the night. At first, I thought I was sleeping badly. Later, I found that I was not the only one awake. Someone turned over. Someone sat up to add firewood. Someone walked outside to look at the moon. Someone simply lay there with their eyes open. On the 10th day after traveling back, I realized this was not insomnia. This was biphasic sleep, something humans had maintained for hundreds of thousands of years, sleeping for about 4 hours first, waking for 1 to 2 hours, and then sleeping another 4 hours. Medieval historical records and sleep studies from the 1990s have both confirmed this. Before artificial lighting, humans naturally slept in 2 parts. During that 1 waking hour, they did nothing useful. They just lay there, thought, and looked into the darkness. For the first time in more than 20 years, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I did not pick up my phone. By the 20th day after traveling back, I had stopped counting the days. Because days were no longer defined by what has to be completed today. They were defined by the simplest things: daylight, eating, talking, and sleeping. I thought of my life before I traveled back. Alarms, clocking in, weekly reports, performance reviews, KPIs, OKRs, overtime, anxiety, insomnia. I had spent 90,000 hours working. That is a real figure. The average modern person spends about 90,000 hours at work over a lifetime, yet I had almost no time simply to exist. And here, every person woke up already complete. They did not need to become more successful. They did not need to accumulate wealth. They did not need to get promoted. They only needed to live, and to live well with the people around them. I used the bone flute they had given me and tried to play a tune. No one judged whether it was good or bad, but someone hummed along. At that moment, I suddenly understood something. I had traveled tens of thousands of years through time, but I had not gone to a more primitive world. I had returned to a more complete human state. And our civilization today, through agriculture, cities, wages, and clocks, has traded away this one thing. You do not need to prove that you are worthy of being alive. You were already worthy from the moment you were born. That was every day I spent in the ancient world without going to work.